Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Chungmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, listeners, welcome to another episode of the Korea Pro podcast. It is now March 20th, Thursday. It's a bit before 4:30 p.m. right now. And we have yet another big news coming out of South Korea. We could see the impeachment of yet another South Korean acting president, Joon Ha.
Yes, so another impeachment on the table from the DP, as always. So Park Chan-de, the floor leader of South Korea's main opposition, the Democratic Party, he announced on Thursday or today that the party intends to launch impeachment proceedings against the acting president or acting president, the Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok.
Yeah, now, I admit that when I first heard this story, I was wondering, why are they doing this? Now, sure, on the one hand, I get it. They are a bit getting anxious and nervous about the Constitutional Court not having issued a ruling on President Yoon's impeachment just yet. We thought it was going to happen this week, and before that, we thought it was going to happen the week before. But still, there's no ruling, and now we are likely going to see maybe an impeachment ruling coming next week. And so, yeah, they're getting nervous, but why are they targeting an acting president who is also double-hatting as the finance minister and is overseeing how South Korea is going to respond to U.S. tariffs? Okay, it's just astounding to me.
Well, yeah, and the other thing that's even more astounding, that the one that replaces him, if he is impeached next week, will be Education Minister Lee Ho,
who has no background in finance or economics or anything of that nature. And sure, another thing that's potentially ringing in my mind as to why they're doing this is because I think the Democratic Party is now just getting into their heads that they are ahead of the PPP. Now, we saw earlier when after Han Duck-soo was impeached, the first acting president, there was a sudden galvanization of the conservative base. And we saw the People Power Party, despite having defended Yoon's martial law, seeing their approval numbers go up, even above the Democratic Party.
Sure.
Now, over the past 3 weeks, the Democratic Party has overtaken the People Power Party.
Only by 4%?
Only by 4%,
Yeah.
at least according to the latest Gallup Korea polls. They are putting way too much faith in this 4% figure, I think.
Well, it's an overreach again, and they'll be accused of overreach from the ruling party as well for yet another impeachment of an acting president. I can't believe I'm saying that right now as well, an acting president in a serious term, but here we are right now.
And the other thing that I don't get is why they decided to make this move now. Because as we just mentioned, if they do impeach him, I can already imagine the Kospi index just plummeting. I can imagine the Korean won losing more of its value when a finance minister is going to be taken out of the equation and being replaced by the education minister. But that's the risk of what might happen if they do impeach him. If they don't impeach him, while the economy might not just tank, what might happen is that the public will perceive the Democratic Party as looking very weak.
Indeed.
If you say that you're going to do something this important, this big, and then next week you pretend that none of it actually happened, people aren't just going to walk away and just let you be. They are going to remember that.
Yeah. And that's going to affect them for the next election, or at least a potential election that will come up, whether or not Yoon is reinstated by the Constitutional Court, which they still have not announced as of yet.
Anyway, speaking of tanking economies, while it's not completely tanking just yet, we heard some rather good news, sort of bad news situation coming out of Washington, D.C. at 3 a.m. South Korea time today. The Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, said that the U.S. economy might be going through some inflationary pressures, partly due to Donald Trump's tariff measures. But he said something very interesting. He also said that he expects that this current inflationary pressures that are going on in the U.S. may be, quote-unquote, transitory. So why is this good news, bad news? The bad news is, sure, because of the inflation going on right now, the Federal Reserve announced that they're going to maintain the interest rates the way they are. And Jerome Powell said that interest rates might be difficult to tame, at least for the rest of this year. And so what that means is that the U.S. consumers will have less purchasing power, less ability to buy imports. South Korea is definitely going to feel that.
Sure.
But the good news is that if this is transitory, as Jerome Powell said, and Powell also said that for 2026 and 2027, the U.S. GDP growth rates are not impacted. And if he's right about this, that means that the pain that South Korean exporters might be feeling right now might not last beyond this year. And so what could happen is that if the Federal Reserve decides to adjust the inflation rates policies next year, then the BOK might have a bit more flexibility going forward.
Right. And this also ties into the impeachment trial that's currently going on for President Yoon Suk-yeol. That if President Yoon is impeached and a new government comes in, what are the effects of that?
Well, the new government is definitely going to have some measures that are available to it. Because right now, because the Bank of Korea really has got its hands tied, the next government will really have to rely on fiscal measures.
Sure.
And this is going to be really a 180 turn from what's going on with the current government. Under the Yoon administration, the South Korean government has really been gearing toward fiscal conservatism.
Right.
And that has not been the case with the Democratic Party. If Yoon is impeached and we see the Democratic Party retake the presidency, then they're going to have a lot of fiscal measures. They're going to want to boost vouchers. They're going to want to boost domestic spending. And this is going to have a very short but badly needed boost for the South Korean economy, at least in the short term.
Right, and just moving on, so South Korea, they also announced new trade measures just this Wednesday to protect some domestic steel producers following the United States decision to impose the 25% tariffs on steel imports. Now, there's a lot of implications for that to rock China relations. What can you tell us a little more about that?
Okay, so to backtrack a little bit, the U.S. imposed 25% tariffs on all steel exporting nations, and South Korea decided to respond with its own sort of measures, but not against the U.S., but against China.
Right.
What South Korea said was that because of overproduction of steel in China, it's impacting global prices and is affecting South Korea's domestic steel producers. And so South Korea imposed 38% anti-dumping duties on Chinese steel. And so in order to circumvent this, what some Chinese producers have been doing is that they've been exporting their steel to third countries, who in turn then exported that steel to South Korea. And so what the finance ministry was saying was that they're going to tighten up these anti-dumping measures, and they're going to make sure that they're going to look at the borders and see all the steel coming in, and they're going to see where the country of origin is. And so they're really going to try to tamp down Chinese imports of Chinese steel. But what really comes down to this is how Beijing is likely going to respond going forward.
Yeah.
Canada is the perfect example. Now, in September last year, along with the Biden administration, the Canadian government imposed a 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. They were saying the same thing that South Korea is saying right now. Chinese overproduction is creating havoc in local prices. And of course, because of these tariffs, China was very upset about this. And what China was saying was that there are going to be repercussions for this if you don't change course. And finally, on March 8th, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce hurt Canada where it hurts most. Agriculture. Exactly. Pork, beef, chicken, you name it. They had tariffs, and the Chinese government said this is only the beginning. They're going to impose more tariffs on more Canadian goods if Canada does not reverse course. So this is, but also at the same time, what China said to Canada was, after all of these comments by the Trump administration about how they want to turn Canada into the 51st state, was that China is willing to have a constructive and better relationship with Canada based on mutual respect.
Sure.
And so it's carrot and stick. Sure, I'm going to give you this carrot, have better relations with us, but I'm also going to give you the stick if you don't do what I say. And Canada's in this position where they don't really have a lot of good choices.
Right.
Relations with the U.S. is at a low point, and they have to try to make do with other trade partners, including China. South Korea is in a very similar position. With all of these U.S. tariffs, South Korea is now potentially losing market access. But there's also China there. Now, China has not imposed any sort of measures on South Korea just yet.
No.
Like we just mentioned, we might not even have an acting president going in a little bit. We might have an acting president. And I think Beijing clearly understands that South Korea is having a moment, that there is no real leadership going on right now.
That's one way to say it.
Yeah. And China's saying, let's wait and see what's going to happen later. Maybe there'll be an impeachment. Maybe there'll be a new election. Maybe there'll be a new government. Let's see how South Korea reacts then.
And we could see sort of an insight or a sneak peek into Beijing's next steps during a trilateral foreign ministers meeting.
Which is coming up this coming Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And so I personally think that China will respond in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
China's going to want to make a very bold statement. And I think right now what we're seeing between South Korea-China relations is a calm before the storm.
Sure.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Now, just moving on to the week ahead, well, we just saw in media reports just a couple of hours ago that the acting president before Choi Sang-mok and the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, he will have his final impeachment ruling on Monday, March 24th at 10 a.m. President Yoon's impeachment ruling date has not yet been confirmed. It's still dragging on, and we will let you know of that when it does come out.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inboxes by the Week Ahead newsletter, and it'll be sent to your email by 2 p.m. on Monday. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Have a good weekend, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
And I'm John Lay. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.